Welcome to a brand new episode of Books to Silver Screens. Cinema and books are powerful mediums. They have so much in common, yet they are so unique. While words create a literary impact and fire our vivid imaginations, movies transport us to a world weaved by its makers. We often see books adapted to the silver screen, but rarely do we see books inspired by movies. Today, let's take you on a literary journey inspired by Indian cinema. Our guest today is Mr. Sumant Batra. He is an insolvency lawyer, an author, an avid reader, and a writer. Sir, a very warm welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Siddharth.
You are a lawyer, and when your career was at its peak, you took a sabbatical for 5 years. You went to Himalayas. You opened a boutique hotel. You are author of 4 books. You're a husband and a father. Where is real Sumant Batra? Will he stand up?
Oh, well, Siddharth, I think the real Sumant Batra is a thinker, and that is why perhaps I'm a lawyer, because a lawyer has to be someone who thinks on his feet. But I think it gives you the power to interpret life beyond what you see in black and white in front of you. And that is what probably has given me the strength to imagine life beyond my straight-jacketed profession of lawyer. While law is something that has given me everything, but it has allowed me also to do other things. But to answer your question more specifically, I'm lawyer first and then anything else.
Okay. You've also written an authorized autobiography on the legendary Sanjiv Kumar. But I personally think that such a star, his life just couldn't be summarized in one book. I mean, there is much more beyond that book. Could you share that with us?
Well, yes, it's an authorized biography, and we call it as authorized because it has been authorized by the family members of late Sanjiv Kumar. Well, you're right. You know, he was such a great artist and a person, and that it is nearly impossible to encapsulate his entire life career into one single book. But the fact remains that the world knew a lot about his art through his cinema, and a lot that has been written about his talent by journalists, magazines, various artists. But he was a very quiet man. He was a very private man in his personal life, and therefore the world didn't know in fact till the book came out about his private life. Where was he born, to what family, how did he grow up, how did he become an actor, or various other aspects of his life. Most of it was very tragic. He died very young.
Yeah.
Like many other in his family before him, his father, grandfather, all died before they attained the age of 50. So, I mean, we in my book focused only on his private life.
Okay.
And therefore, you won't really find much reference to his books, his cinema, barring a few which we thought we wanted to mention because of the anecdotes that were involved in the writing of those parts of the book.
Any particular chapter you like the most, and the reason for the same?
Well, I think what I like the most about the life that he lived was his complete dedication to his mother. Because she became a widow and she was deprived of all the property by the partners in the business that late husband had, and she really had to struggle to bring up the children. And Sanjiv Kumar always remained mindful of the struggle and the sacrifices that his mother made for him. And even though he was very successful, he remained a very humble, modest, obedient son to his mother, and always respected her sentiments, her wishes, whether it was his marriage, whether what he wanted to do in life, how he wanted to conduct himself. And I think that is a very inspirational part, and I really wanted my children to read that as well, because it's so important to know the mother figure, how important a role that she plays, and she doesn't expect anything from you in return when you grow up. but how important it is that even when you grow up and howsoever old you are, that you need to continue to respect your mother.
Okay, there are so many film stars in the Indian cinema. You have Dharmendra, you have Amitabh Bachchan, you also have Jitendra. But why only Sanjiv Kumar? What inspired you to take that
There were two
character?
reasons for that. I think as someone who understands cinema to the extent that I do, I was always inspired by his cinema, the films that he made. I think Nai Din Nai Raat is something which was the turning point. For me, Sholay was the iconic, way you could make the cinema, because we were young, very influenced by, the grandeur of Sholay.
Yeah, yeah.
But when I saw on Doordarshan Naya Din Nai Raat, it changed my perception about what cinema as an art is. A man as talented as that and so much deprived of the recognition that he deserved. And then I watched every single film of his. And when a common friend reached out to me that the family was very keen that his life should be documented, I took up the opportunity, and I think it was an honor to be able to write about a man who was so talented and such a great human being.
Definitely. I mean, he won so many accolades for the country and also represented Indian cinema on global stage, certainly a recognized star on the global platform. What are the challenges you faced while you were thinking about writing on him, or while you were writing the book?
Well, the difficulty is that people in the industry don't really open up when you ask them to write, to say something about people who they worked with, whether they're co-workers or anybody, because they're not too sure how their comments would be received, and most of the times they're not very honest also about it. But I was fortunate because I didn't really have to, interview too many co-authors, too many co-stars, too many people he worked with. Just 5 or 6 key people who directed his films or were his co-stars. So he was a very gracious man, and one thing which I have also found was that he always helped not only just his family members but also many outside of them as well whenever they needed any financial help.
Okay, definitely there are some, lots and lots of movies which are inspired by books. To name a few, we have Heather, Lutera, especially in Bollywood, 3 Idiots, Pariniti. Considering the fact that how Indian cinema has evolved over the years, how do you analyze that? Is a movie doing justice to a good book?
So Siddharth, this can be very subjective, because my view could vary from the view of any other person when you watch a film. But I think this cinema has always been inspired by what happens in the society around you, because that's what filmmakers get influenced by. But at the same point of time, they also believe that some of the great stories can also be told as effectively on the screen. And that is why you would find that some of the greatest classics have been made into films, and repeatedly. For example, Shakespeare's plays. Vishal Bhardwaj is known to make, but not only Vishal Bhardwaj, from the time of Saurabh Modi, films have been made on Shakespeare.
Hamlet too.
Yes, that's right. And not just in India but globally. At the same point of time, you will find that not just the classics, but even pulp fiction has been made into great cinema. Look at Kati Patang. For example, Gulshan Nanda's about 6 or 7 books which people used to read on at the railway station. They will buy, leave it even on the train, because pulp fiction was something which was meant to be read and thrown. Have been made in some of the most successful films, and Kati Patang is one of them, as I mentioned. So I think it is always, but some films do not really do as much of a justice to a book as one would expect, but that can also be very subjective in my opinion.
Okay, you've also written a book called Anarkali. Mr. Batra, there are some other books also written on the same character. What is different in your book? What would readers find different?
So Anarkali hasn't really been written much about, except the play which was written by Imtiaz Ali Taz in 1911, somewhere around that time, and then he revised it in 1922, and that play is something which inspired the 2 Anarkali films that were made, one as a silent film, one as Anarkali itself, and then later on Mughal-e-Azam. They're all inspired by that play. There's no book as such on Anarkali, but surprisingly there are 2 doctorate theses on Anarkali. by 2 foreign universities. There is this, and it's available in the public domain, and they were very helpful as well. They analyze, for example, the dance, etc. But they are based on the movies, and of course, there is some text that is written about Anarkali by some historians, some poets, some foreign travelers. But that's a very fragmented kind of reference. There is no single comprehensive book on Anarkali. This book is in fact the first book on Anarkali, and it's a researched book in that sense. So for me, the reason I thought I picked up this subject, it actually comes from an episode, an anecdote I should tell you. So Fatehpur Sikri, I'd gone there, and in Fatehpur Sikri, when you go there, they will invariably, the guide will show you that door which remains locked, and they say this is the door through which Anarkali was allowed to be escaped, and she went through an underground tunnel which opened up somewhere near Yamuna, and she ended up in Delhi, and from there she went to Lahore. But I questioned the guide. I said, what evidence do you have? How can you say that she actually was allowed to escape from there? Then he actually said a very strange but a very powerful thing. He said, जनाब ये हमारा सच है, हमारे पास ही रहने दीजिए, अगर आपका कोई सच है तो बताइए, नहीं तो हमारे सच को मत झुठलाइए. And that was a very powerful statement, and actually set me thinking. And then I took upon the challenge to find the truth, because he was telling that this is my truth. If you have your truth, you tell your truth. And then I started researching on the book, and I took about 3.5 to 4 years to research on the book. So it is a historical fiction, and what actually if the central theme of my book is that the three cinema that has been made on Anarkali is around that episode of love story with Salim, and how she's punished by Emperor Akbar for having fallen in love with the heir apparent, but nobody knows about Anarkali, where she came from, who was she born to, where did she grew up, what was her education, where did she learn her Kathak, and why was she so fascinated, why was she such a great dancer, and what actually really happened, did she escape, did she die, all that. So my book is actually about her life, her childhood, her parents, and it's also about psychological, why she was a rebel, why did she choose to challenge the emperor and not surrender her love. So that's what the book is. So it's a historical fiction. Everything is fact, but there is a little bit of fiction around Anarkali's life, because there's nothing written. So I had to imagine what this person would be like, interpreting what we know about her.
What is something different which viewers find in Anarkali, as a character? You've taken up a character which is really complicated. When people think about Anarkali, they go to the era of Mughal-e-Azam.
Well, yes, you're right. I think, and that was perhaps one of the most challenging tasks for me, because when people think of Anarkali, they imagine Madhubala of Mughal-e-Azam, because that is such a grand film, and Madhubala was so iconic, and she was beautiful beyond any description. So one of the challenges tasks for me was to imagine Anarkali in such a way, present in such a way that people would decipher my Anarkali very different from Madhubala, and they would imagine her even as a physical person, in her beauty, in her character persona, in her way of speaking, dancing, in all respects very different from Madhubala. So that was perhaps one of the most challenging tasks, to break her out of the mold of Madhubala. The second, of course, I think for me was to sort of present Anarkali what people doesn't know about. So Madhubala, or whether it is Anarkali in the previous films, was all about the love episode with Salim. All was about the tragic ending of that love affair. It was all about how Salim became a rebel because of Anarkali. But nobody really knew about Anarkali beyond that episode. Who was she? Where did she come from? Who were her parents? Where was she brought up? What was her education? Where did she learn her Kathak? And why did she become the rebel she was? Where did she gather the courage to be able to confront Akbar and choose her love over her, her death over her love? And all that would require a personality, a very strong personality. And all that would require an upbringing, a character. And so my focus was entirely to study Anarkali's childhood and interpret her character from whatever I read her to to sort of, in my own way, present that this is how she must have been brought up, how she would have reached where she reached, ultimately Agra, where that with the dance episode she's introduced, right? So my book is entirely about Anarkali, not about the love episode. Obviously, love episode appears in the book, but that's one of the chapters. But it is essentially about Anarkali. She is the protagonist.
Okay. Mr. Batra, how do you think the modern cinema differs from old cinema in terms of storytelling and audience experience?
Well, I think drastically differently.
Okay.
The sensibilities have changed. I am not saying one for the good or the better of the other. In my view, cinema of the earlier times represented what we were. When Indian cinema became the talkies, we were very close to attaining independence. And so cinema focused largely on the struggle for independence, the desire to attain independence and freedom.
Yeah.
And of course, the social aspects of that time in a very subtle way. And then, of course, after independence, it focused on reconstruction of the nation, industrialization. And then, of course, towards the 60s, 70s, it moved to the issues that faced the society at that point in time. And the cinema was always seen as entertainment, but it was a very serious reflection of the society and the times. Today, I believe, or at least in the last 20-30 years, it's more about entertainment. But I think it is reinventing itself again. If you see the cinema of the last 8 to 10 years, clearly it is now becoming a very serious medium, and people find entertainment within that as well. So in my view, it has been quite consistent, barring a few drops in the quality of these filmmakers or the actors.
Yeah.
But nothing really significantly has changed in this as far as the soul of cinema is concerned.
Yeah, correct. And also, Mr. Batra, there are some stories which are specifically written to be launched in cinemas, and it's very common in OTT platforms. Do you think it's good or bad? It is auguring well for the Indian cinema, or for the cinema for that matter?
So I would say that there have always been two kinds of stories on which cinema has been made. One which normal authors have written, classics or pulp, which the filmmakers borrow or get inspired by to write, to make films. And then those that have been written by script writers, and they take it to the producer and say, why don't you make a film on this? And sometimes the producer who then gets a writer, commissions a writer and says, this is an idea I have in my mind, why don't you write it? So if you see Diwar, Zanjeer, all these, Salim Javed, they used to write the story, and they used to take it to the filmmaker and say, you should make a film on this.
Yes.
And sometimes the producer says, I have this much budget, I will hire a writer, he will write a film, I want to write I want a masala movie, so you just write a script. But these days, now it's very common that OTT, because there is so much vast content on OTT, they need more and more
and
stories.
Not just one platform. There are various platforms.
Exactly.
I mean, it's a very difficult for a user to understand the concept of OTT, number one, and then to choose the particular content, what to watch.
Yeah. So Siddharth, I think so. It's good that OTT is there in such a vast measure, and it gives opportunity to more and more authors whose books get selected. But the trouble is that now many writers are actually writing keeping this in mind, that their book should get selected for an OTT thing. So their content is therefore not creatively original, because they're just writing keeping in mind that this will look good on an OTT screen, and it will be easy to sell to a producer of an OTT platform, and therefore I should write this, I should include this. For example, some of the curse words and some of these kind of things, which have become so common, which you would not normally use, but now they are used in abundance and done because they are the, if I may say, the low-hanging fruit for the OTT platforms.
Do you also think that the OTT platforms, since the time they have come in and they have established themselves, or perhaps establishing themselves, they have overshadowed the silver screens or cinema?
No, I don't think so. I think that was a momentary kind of a concern during the COVID period in particular.
Momentary pause?
Yeah, I would say no. I mean, I think what happened, this OTT really gained momentum during the COVID times. People realized that, you know, they could watch good cinema, good content, even sitting at home. And after COVID also, I think it maintained its momentum for some time. But you will see in the last 8 to 10 years, the kind of cinema that is being made now for the big screen is actually inspired from OTT, that you should really make good content, real time stories, and you don't really need the stars all the time to make good films.
Yeah,
as was
correct.
And that's also because the era of the stars is gone. You know, I mean, people now.
Do you really think so?
Yeah, I think Indian viewer is maturing very, very significantly. Now, it's much more evolved, is much more mindful. There is a section of the society which wants to watch glamorized, you know, dreamy cinema.
Yes.
But I would say middle class would still want to watch very good content. If there is a star in it, good enough, but they would not go to watch a movie simply because it's
absolutely. You put that right. Today's audience is very much aware of the fact what they're watching. They now want to watch real stories. They just don't want to immerse themselves in the fascinating world. Now, quickly, let's talk about your books. You've written 4 books till now. The Indians, Sanjiv Kumar, an actor's actor, Anar, and there's one more in the pipeline. You know, which is on insolvency, your subject. You have written on diverse subjects. Why is that so?
Well, I think it's a personal temperament, perhaps, because I've never really repeated a thing in my life, whether it's, you know, various other things that I've done in my life. So it's similarly, you know, just because my Anarkali is a national bestseller, I should really write another historical fiction. I don't believe in that.
Okay.
I wrote this book on insolvency. Is very different from the other books on insolvency that I've written in the past. I have more than 4 books, but the other books are on insolvency. They're academic, scholarly. But this one is actually a book which will interest an average reader as well, because it's told about the biggest insolvency case in the country that we have had so far. And that too, where you had 25,000 home buyers which were left in lurch. So it involved the lives of 25,000 middle-class family, and I wrote it therefore in the form of how the struggle of home buyers. It's a scholarly book, but it's written in the form of a story which can be read by an average person as well. And I think I write whatever I feel from my heart, from my inner voice, I should write about, without really sticking to any particular genre where my book has done well. Even Sanjiv Kumar would done so well that it featured on Kaun Banega Crorepati as well. You know, so, but I just sort of chase my heart.
Okay. So, any plans for film adaptation? We've heard from our sources that you've been offered by Vishal Bharadwaj.
Well, yes, because the book was launched by Vishal Bharadwaj, Anarkali. So he made an open offer in public that if whenever someone decides to make a film on it, I would like to direct it. But as of now, I don't really think I want to do it. And I think the biggest challenge will be who would play Anarkali.
Okay.
For Sanjiv Kumar, I had 2 offers. But I said, you have to tell me who would act as Sanjiv.
So do you have any names in your mind?
If Rishi Kapoor would have been alive, you know, I think he would have made a perfect Sanjiv Kumar. But as of now, I today can't see anybody who would be able to do justice to the character of Sanjiv Kumar.
Okay.
If Khan, if he would have been alive, I would have thought that maybe yes. Perhaps with some effort he could have done. Anarkali, I just don't know who at the moment. But yes, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. At the moment, I don't think I'm thinking of that. I have some other things in my mind which, you know, I'm trying to sort of crystallize.
Okay. So now that you're writing on different subjects, what's next?
Well, I'm actually researching on 2 books. I don't know whether they will really materialize, because not everything that you research on shapes into a book. Because at some point in time you realize that it doesn't really have the depth of a story. It won't connect with the readers. I'm working on 2. One is also historical. It's not a fiction, but it's a historical book. And the other is a major episode that happened after independence in India, independent India, which hasn't really been written much about. It was a mystery. It remains unsolved. But I'm trying to do a lot of research on that and see if I can come across enough material to interest my publisher and reader, or first of all myself then. But probably it'll take about 2 years.
Okay, what message would you like to give to the young budding authors or avid readers, you know, who want to research and write on different subjects? How to start, how to begin with?
Well, I think any book writing requires a lot of discipline. It requires a tremendous amount of effort to sort of stay focused, and it is not really something that pays you well. It can't be made into your career unless you become a bestseller and you're churning out a book every year which is a bestseller and you're getting paid tremendous amount of royalty. It happens to only a few. So I would suggest that you should set aside some time out of your routine career life and use that to optimum level to do your research and write the way your style is. Don't copy anybody's style. Write the way it comes to you naturally, and just understand what this current generation likes to read, and their language is at the moment very casual. They like
Okay.
very casual language. They don't like literary language, and if you really want to be writing general fiction, etc., don't get into too heavy stuff, is what I would like to believe.
All right, with this, we have come to an end of this episode. It was wonderful having this conversation with you, sir, and we wish you all the best for your future endeavors.
Thank you so much, Siddharth, for having me. Thank you.
Cinema continues to evolve, entertain, and captivate audiences with its unique stories and vibrant culture. Adapting books into films adds another exciting layer to storytelling, bringing beloved stories to the screen. Whether we are talking about the future of Indian films or the challenge of book adaptations, it's clear that both play a significant role in the world of cinema.